Aurobindo's The Life Divine, Book 2, Part 1, Chapter 2, Brahman, Purusha, Ishwara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with another video about Aurobindo's The Life Divine. This time, Book 2, Part 1, Chapter 2. And for all of you who are not Indian, if you read here the title of the chapter, Brahman, Purusha, Ishwara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti, you might think, oh God, now all these Sanskrit names and religious stuff, what is that all about? Do you really have to know this? And before we start with this, before we explain what these terms mean, it is very important to understand the misunderstanding the British conquerors had about what is called Hinduism. When the European conquerors, mostly British, came to India, they found many religions being practiced there. Christianity, Islam, yes, Christianity was there already because St. Thomas went there. Even Judaism, Buddhism, all kinds of stuff. And all the stuff they didn't have a name for already, they just called Hinduism. So it's important to understand there is no such a thing as Hinduism. Hinduism is a generic term for everything that did not have a name back then, and they didn't know what to make of it. Hinduism is a term for many traditions of religion and many traditions of spirituality in India for thousands of years. And why is this important to understand Aurobindo and this book and this chapter? It is because inbuilt in the word Hinduism, there's a confusion of religion and spirituality. Religion is about law and order and ritual and gods, described in Spiral Dynamics as blue, while spirituality is about the soul and about consciousness, about the absolute and the psychic being, described in Spiral Dynamics as second tier and third tier. Now, Aurobindo was not very interested in religion, nor did he want to start a religion. He was very aware that he could start a religion. He could make himself, style himself as a saint, as a Buddha or Jesus-like being with millions of followers. The possibility was there, he didn't choose it. Contrary to Meher Baba, who did choose this path, more or less successfully. Aurobindo was first into politics and then into spirituality. So whenever he uses terms like Purusha and Prakriti and Brahman and so on, it is meant in a spiritual sense, in a spiritual meaning, not in a religious one. He's not talking about gods. Even if he uses words like Godhead and God and the divine and so on, he uses religious terms, but he doesn't mean it in a religious way. It's in a spiritual way. It's always about consciousness. So in this chapter, he talks about the duality in consciousness and the Trinity in consciousness, using these religious or apparently religious, seemingly religious terms. In the last chapter, we have seen that consciousness, the absolute, is indescribable and indeterminable. Yet the ancient Vedas and Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, they have tried to describe it and assign names. And so Aurobindo is using those. Because to just say it cannot be described, can be put into words, it's not enough for him. He wants to try anyway. So on the one hand, we have Brahman, Purusha and Ishwara. Those are words for one and the same thing, the passive existence of consciousness, the absolute. That something exists, as we have talked about in the previous chapter. Something exists, and we can call this Brahman or Purusha or Ishwara. They all mean the same thing, the highest principle, the highest imaginable principle of existence. the indescribable and indeterminable all and everything, beyond time and space and beyond our mind. And then on the other hand, there's an active creative force that we can call Maya, Prakriti or Shakti. Again, these are three words for one and the same thing. Maya, Prakriti, Shakti is all the same. Three words for the same principle, which is creation, manifestation. Also, we could call it nature or the world, cosmos, matter, life. This active creative principle brings the potential existence into being, into life. It is the creatrix. Without it, nothing would exist in a way that it could be perceived or experienced. It would be more like an idea or a dream. Brahman, Vishnu, Shiva, Purusha, Ishwara, they dream the world, they conceive of it, they make it potentially possible, but that it really exists, that something can be perceived and experienced, it needs this other creative, active aspect, which is also sometimes called the Divine Mother. So we can call it Maya, Prakriti, Shakti, Lakshmi, Kali, Saraswati, and so on. But these are principles. In religion, they're gods and goddesses, but in spirituality, they're principles of existence, of the universe, of creation, of consciousness. They are not beings like the monotheistic God of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism seems to be a being. They are existence. They are a being. They are not a being or beings. They are being. They are consciousness on the one hand and life on the other hand. And everything that is them. And they are everything that is and more. But actually they are just terms to describe the one and all, indescribable, indeterminable, ineffable, which we could also just call the absolute or the infinite. And as soon as we ascribe attributes to this infinite, then we need more words, and those are those words in Vedic terms. And firstly, we have this duality built in, the duality of conceiving something and then putting it into action on the one hand, and then the Trinity of Satchitananda. So in the end we have six. We have this consciousness in its Trinity, and we have creation, nature, life in its Trinity. So we have six words which are Brahman, Purusha and Ishwara for the consciousness aspect, in Maya, Prakriti and Shakti for the creation, the manifestation aspect. And they are both versions of Satchitananda, of existence, force, consciousness, bliss. This chapter is basically only important so that he later can use these words and people can understand what he means when he uses these words, so that he doesn't have to explain them again and again and again. It's a long chapter, but this is the gist of it. This is what's really essential here. Brahman, he calls the self with capital S, because it is the one being that is trying to experience itself. Then Purusha, he calls the conscious being. And Ishwara, he calls the divine being. So in Satchitananda terms, Brahman corresponds to Sat, existence, Purusha corresponds to Chit, the force or the consciousness, and Ishwara corresponds to Ananda, bliss, to enjoy the consciousness and creation. Similarly, we have Maya, Prakriti and Shakti correspond to Satchidananda. Maya is the creative process of all things, corresponding to Sat, existence. Prakriti is the nature of force that is dynamically executive, corresponding to Chit, consciousness, force. And Shakti corresponds to Ananda, bliss. Shakti is power. So in this case, Ananda is not only meaning bliss, but also power. Meaning it enjoys the process of creation, the possibility in action of creation, the act of creation. Creation itself, as nature and life, is the joy, is the Ananda. And the interplay of all these we call Leela. Leela is the cosmic play of truth, manifesting itself in a multitude of possibilities. So on the one hand, all is one. All is just the absolute, the infinite, the indeterminable. On the other hand, all is also many. The infinite also means infinite possibilities, infinite number of parts and creations. It is unbound and illimitable. Yeah, the so-called male aspect has no limits in imagining possibilities, and the so-called female aspect has no limits in creating possibilities, creating forms of life, creating forms of matter, creating forms of consciousness. Everything is possible, even more that we can imagine. The absolute is not limited to what our mind can imagine. So why does he discuss all this? So far so good, but what's the use of this? First of all, there is no contradiction. All this squabbling of religious and spiritual leaders over the centuries and millennia, he says, they're seeming contradiction. They're not really contradictory, because an infinite, limitless absolute can do this and that at the same time. It doesn't have to, one thing doesn't have to exclude each other. There is a logic behind it, but it's beyond our human logic. But to summarize it, something exists, and this thing that exists can express itself in whatever way it wants. It can do whatever it wants, and it can create whatever it wants. And it is doing so in a playful way that we call Leela. It is doing so in an omnipresent way. It is doing so in a sort of self-manifestation, self-creation, self-perception, self-experience. So then, unfortunately, we're back to the question, why is it not all fun? It kind of sounds fun, but why are we as human beings not experience it as fun? Or not all of the time? And here we are back at the Ananda aspect of the things. The Ananda, the bliss aspect, the power aspect, that has to do with Shiva and Ishwara and Shakti, has an inbuilt forgetting, unfortunately. It only seems to work if there's some veiling and forgetting going on, some hiding. It's a hide and seek game. You see something, and on the first glance you think it's terrible, but then you look behind the veil and it's cuckoo, it's me again, the divine. In the tantric exploration of the universe, of Shakti, there are 5 principles, and the last 3, samara, Tirodhana and Anugraha are about that, about this forgetting. Forgetting, hiding or deleting memory. Otherwise it wouldn't work. If you're playing hide and seek with friends and you always know where they are, who is exactly where, there's no point in playing the game. The thrill of the game is to not know where they are and who is where. And this thrill we call ananda, bliss. To enjoy even forgetting and not knowing, even ignorance and even death. But the good news is that there is a pattern, and this pattern we can connect to. We can conceive as human beings part of this pattern. And to do this we call enlightenment. And for Aurobindo, that's the only way to react to this Leela, to this cosmic game, is to conceive it as much as humanly possible. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps others to find this channel. Thank you for my Patreons. Thank you for joining me as a patron, and see you soon.